All right, friends, welcome. Oh my gosh, 28 of you already. I mean, I really didn't know whether to expect 6 or 9 of you to show up for this. So 28 is great. Welcome to our town hall. We're going to start, well, we've just started. We're going to promise to end no later than 8:30 because I know you guys are just fired up to be on Zoom again today, huh? Zoom. You couldn't wait. More Zoom all the time. I want to pray as we get started. So let's pray together. God, thank you so much for uh, how you've led us in this last season, how you continue to lead us. And we ask you especially to lead us in this matter as we do some discerning tonight, as we do some talking tonight, that you would bring your grace to us, your voice to us, and that you would, through our conversation, illuminate what you want to illuminate for us. Amen. All right. A couple of remarks before we get into the agenda, and that is just to state the obvious. I think in the conversations I'm having with people and in my own heart, as I feel my feelings, uh, there's just still a whole lot of anxiety in our country. Nothing is nothing is settled with the election, really. Certainly, there is anxiety around that. There's anxiety around the increasing numbers of COVID-19 cases in Minnesota and around the world. And there's a sense of sort of foreboding winter dread coming. I'm feeling that from everybody, like that we are forced inside and what do we do about the holidays? So I just want to invite you all, honestly, to breathe in right now and breathe out. And I want to remind us all, number one, we really are not in control. We think we are, and we're just in control of so little. And what I'm trying to figure out these days is the more I can get in touch with the reality of that, the more I can embrace reality as it really is and not what I want it to be desperately by clutching and grabbing and forcing it to be something. So I'm finding some freedom in this mantra that I'm just not in control. I know that freaks me out as well, because I grab control again and then I let it go. And I grab control again, I let it go. And then the second thing really is everything is temporary. It really, honestly, really is. In Christ, we are safeguarded and protected, and those are the things that lasts. But things like elections and things like pandemics, they really do come and go. And I know that maybe even sounds insensitive, but in another way, I hope it can sound hopeful, like we will move through this eventually. We really will. The pattern of life is for things to ebb and flow and to come and go. There's morning and there's evening. And that's even the rhythm of the creation poem, which I find so much comfort from in Genesis 1. There's evening and morning, day one. So that really will come. And then thirdly, hang on to kindness. Hang on to kindness. Be kind to yourself. Be kind to the strangers you run into as they're stressed out at the grocery store, maybe at work or across the screen. Everyone's so stressed out. And I wonder if sometimes just a smile or a kind word, an affirmation from someone that wasn't expecting it could really make the difference in someone's day. So I wonder if we could rally around that, rally around kindness. Amen. I think we can. Okay, I want to share my screen and I'm going to walk you through just what I think is a delightful PowerPoint deck that's going to help us walk through this this meeting. Is everyone seeing that? Yeah. Okay. So here's the agenda. We're going to cover some new COVID-19 guidelines for worshiping together. I think that's going to bring some clarity to us as we think about, when and if we can ever worship together again. So that'll be good. And then we'll cover the denominational implications for the vote that we took in May. Thirdly, we're going to talk about some next steps that we're hoping to take for a holistic embodiment of our LGBTQIA plus inclusion statement. And then I'm going to give you a little teaser for Advent. We're going to save the best for last. What I'm planning on doing is presenting for about, I don't know, 45 minutes. And then what I want to do is open it up for lots of robust Q&A for the remainder of the time. Okay. So I want to ask you to go ahead and hold your questions until we get to the end, because I think I'll probably cover some things that you would maybe ask a little bit later. And but then we'll open it up for Q and R, and we'll do the questions via chat. Okay. So everybody thumbs up. Can we, everybody hear me okay? And we're doing okay. All right. So here we go. New COVID-19 guidelines for worshiping in person. And what we've decided as a staff and as elders is to really take a facts-based, numbers-based approach to when we feel safe worshiping safely again in person. And our protocol is going to be based on the current 14-day case rate per 10,000 residents in Hennepin County, which is where Elam is. And I want to note that in all of these three scenarios that we're going to talk about, there's going to be an online option for all three phases. So we realize that even when we get back to worshiping in person, some of you are going to choose to stay at home for a while, and that's totally okay. We're going to continue to provide online options, and we're really hoping to provide them in such a way that people who are worshiping at home and watching online can continue to participate in the all plays through chats. So who's ever preaching will be reading those all plays. And so it will continue to be a participatory experience, even for those of you who are worshiping online. Okay. So this is based roughly on what the schools are using, the K through 12 Minnesota schools are using, whether or not they are worshiping whether or not they're being educated distance only, hybrid, or in person only. So when the numbers are between 0 and 10, again, that's the current 14-day rolling case rate per 10,000 residents, we'll feel comfortable worshiping in person and online with kids ministry. Now, just so you know, we haven't been below 10 for many months, if ever, since the start of COVID. So we have ways to go in that. And then scenario number 2 is what we're calling hybrid number 2. And that's when the case rate is between 11 and 20. We'll worship in person without kids ministry. And again, we'll do Zoom live stream again. And in both of those scenarios, hybrid 1 and hybrid 2, we're going to be following the CDC recommended guidelines for worshipers. And so we're going to be social distancing, we're using masks and sanitizers. We're going to be doing Eucharist with prepackaged Eucharist bread and the juice. And so it'll be definitely different. But we feel like it's a step towards getting back to whatever normal will be. We felt like we needed to put together a plan that wasn't based on how we feel or, well, it's been so long, we got to get back. We wanted to be safe, but we also wanted to put a plan together for getting back together to worship. When the numbers are above 20, like we see now, they're 34.25. You can see that on the graphic. We'll worship via Zoom live stream only. Now you'll notice that, we might be 1 week, we might dip back into 19, and then the next week it might go back to above 20. We're going to have to really be communicative and talking together and planning together about as the numbers ebb and flow. What we're going to do is we're going to put this graphic, this updated graphic out every single Thursday. And we're going to put the updated number for the rolling 14-day case rate. So you'll know, like, heading into the next week or two, we're going to be worshiping online only, or, hey, we're heading back into hybrid 2. It may take us a couple of weeks if we see the dials move based on the numbers to get ready to move to the next phase, but that is our plan. And again, I want to let you know, we all know that the rates are quite a bit higher than they have been. The last reported case rate, again, that's October 11th to the 24th, was 34.25, putting us solidly in the online only. So that's where we are. Okay, you guys. again, and I want to mention when we do go back to in-person, the at Elam right now, the maximum attendance at a Sunday service is 40. Now that includes me and the people leading worship. So we'll keep the participants to a minimum, but we'll do online registration for those services. So we'll make that really clear how to register online. And we're registering for two reasons. One, because we need to know that there's a cap, but two, for contact tracing. And so if there, God forbid, would be any positive testing from someone who was at a service, then we could immediately tell the folks that were at the service that they were exposed. So, and we'll be also following Elam's guidelines and Elam's protocol. All right. Keep your questions, hold your questions for that if you have any. Let's move on to the next one. And that is denominational implications from the LGBTQIA plus vote. All right, so here we go. Just reminding you, on May 18th, 2020, the members of Genesis West voted to affirm the following statement, and we voted by a margin of 90 yes votes to 8 no votes. The pastors of Genesis West shall be allowed to perform same-sex weddings according to their conscience, and all qualified LGBTQIA plus persons shall be considered for any open staff positions. Now, of course, included in all those things are any other, it's full participation. It's members, elders, but we wanted to highlight those two because those two particularly are unique as it relates to our denomination. So that's just a reminder. That's where we are. That vote was passed at the annual meeting last May. And then the question that should come up and should follow is, what stance does the Evangelical Covenant Church hold on same-sex marriage and ordination? Most of you know this, but again, for those of you that don't know, the ECC believes in celibacy. This comes right out of their statement, in singleness and faithfulness in heterosexual marriage. So since all credentialed pastors are expected to abide by those practices, the ordination of anyone in a same-sex marriage or a same-sex relationship in our denomination is not allowed. And it also follows that pastors who are credentialed or ordained by the ECC, like I am, are not allowed to officiate same-sex weddings or participate in same-sex weddings in any way. So that's just, I'm just stating the obvious for some of you, but reminding others of you. So the question really comes to us, folks, should we stay or should we go? That really is the question. And I want to highlight some of the questions that will form our answer. These are not certainly all the questions, but there are certainly some of them. And number one is, do we sense God calling us to try to remain in the ECC, or do we sense God calling us to leave? Now, we may sense one or the other, or neither. We may sense God saying, choose your best choice. On the other hand, we may sense God calling us to stay or calling us to leave. Another really important question is these next two ones. Would LGBTQIA plus members and other affirming churches in the ECC be helped by our attempt to stay in terms of solidarity or things like that? Maybe the most important question, or certainly one of the most important questions, is, what do LGBTQIA plus folks from Genesis say about our staying and our going? This is a huge consideration. And in fact, we've been advised by folks who've been through this process before, this should be one of your first questions, that it should really be folks in the LGBTQIA plus community should be asked, and we should take their answers seriously. And then fourthly, and again, this is not total, these are certainly only some of the questions. If we do decide to stay, are we willing to spend the necessary time and energy that would be required if we chose to, and I put stay and fight, meaning the ECC is clear and has already removed churches that have statements similar to ours. So it's not really a question, you guys, of if we would be moved into a process where we would be deemed out of harmony, and then that would move to a vote eventually at the annual meeting of the ECC. that happens every June, and then the delegates would vote. It's not a foregone conclusion of how they would vote, but based on the really consistent and pretty overwhelming majority of the vote that happened in Omaha in 2019, that process would get underway, especially if I did a same-sex wedding, or we hired a same-sex staff member, a LGBTQIA staff member. So that really frames the question that we're going to talk about tonight. So what I'm trying to do is before we get into a discussion, I'm trying to give you my responses to as many of the frequently asked questions as possible. So what's the process of leaving the ECC? If we choose to voluntarily leave the ECC, we would first need to have a vote from the members of Genesis, and that vote would need to carry by a 2/3 majority margin. If it were to pass, then we simply notify the Northwest Conference and the ECC, and the matter would then be brought up at the following annual meeting for the Northwest Conference in April, and those delegates would vote to affirm that. Just so you know, I've been in close contact with the superintendent of the Northwest Conference. Mark Stromberg, has known every single step of the way where we're at. He knows where we're at now. We've had conversations recently on email and in person. And so just wanted you all to know this has never been a secret. We've never tried to hide. We've always tried to be as transparent as possible. And we maintain a good relationship with the Northwest Conference. They recognize that our vote makes us out of harmony, and they are really, I think, graciously and sensitively encouraging us to consider voluntarily leaving. That's sort of where they are at. If we left the ECC, would we join another denomination? And some of you have talked to me. Some of you have said, hey, have you considered the Episcopals? Have you considered the ELCA? And certainly all those, yes and yes. One of the things that we'll have to look at is not only theology, but church polity. And so, for example, if you join the Episcopal Church or the Lutheran Church, I'm just giving you examples. Only ordained clergy can serve Eucharist, right? And you have to use certain words for Eucharist celebrations. And so there's just lots of considerations beyond theological positions that I want you to know that we would have to really think through. So if we voted to leave the ECC, we would begin researching 3 options. And I want to say that as elders and as staff, we've really talked about, we want this to be 2 separate processes. One process to discern leaving, and then we catch our breath, and another separate process to discern what affiliation we have. We really feel like it's important to do those 2 processes as separate, so one doesn't cloud the other. But the 3 options are these. 1, join another denomination. Again, I've mentioned 2 that are possibilities: Episcopal Church, ELCA, the United Church of Christ. There are others. It would need to be a denomination that allows us to have our stance, our inclusive stance. Number 2, we could choose to be non-denominational, but affiliate with like-minded network of churches. There are those. Again, these aren't denominations, but they would provide care, support, and resources for our church and its pastors. Or 3, simply being non-denominational and having informal connections with other like-minded churches and organizations. Now, you may ask the question at this point, like, my gosh, why did we join a denomination in the first place? Please, someone tell me. And the reason why is because we love the ECC. And I would say I still love the ECC. The Evangelical Covenant Church is a wonderful denomination with so many good things going for it, including the work they're doing with racial justice and multi-ethnicity, and their history of majoring on the majors is so beautiful and brilliant, of being a third way. They're really, truly the third way denomination. And so in part, that's why, some of us have been troubled that we, as a denomination, haven't found a way to be third way regarding LGBTQIA. And that's the sadness. Okay. So we joined, and I got ordained in this denomination in good faith and for very good reasons. And I hope you hear me say that really strongly, is this is a great denomination. And in many ways, I love it. At times, we come to these crux points where we have to decide, are we going to maybe make a move away? If we do, we can hopefully do so again in good faith and not demonizing, simply saying, where is God calling us, and what do we need to do to follow that? I hope you hear that just really loud and clear from me. And it doesn't mean I don't have feelings about it. Okay. I can have feelings about it. I have lots of feelings about it. But at the end of the day, we don't need to demonize an organization in order to differentiate from it. Okay. That's an important piece. Okay. If we left the ECC, what happens to Steve's ordination credentials? And what about, I won't talk about myself in the third person anymore. What about my pension? Many of you are really concerned about my pension. I really appreciate that. I'm kidding. A few of you were, though. I would voluntarily relinquish my ordination credentials with the ECC, and I would do so with some sadness, you guys, partly because I worked really hard for those bad boys. And I remember that day. It was only a couple years ago, and it was an honor to do that. But because of the larger call, I would gladly relinquish those ordination credentials. So then the next question is like, well, wait a minute, can you still be a pastor? Yes, if Genesis left the ECC as a non-denominational church, the elder team would have the power to license me locally. So I would have all the, authority needed by the state anyway, in order to do all my sacerdotal duties. So no worries there. I may choose to pursue an ordination with a different denomination, which may or may not be the one that Genesis chooses, because I hold my ordination with the covenant separately from Genesis as a covenant church. The same would be the case as it relates to my own ordination. And I will do some thinking about that and some discerning. And I wouldn't lose my pension if Genesis left the ECC. My pension would essentially be frozen. It would be changed then to a different account. And then when I got to a certain age, which is less time than it used to be, oh my gosh, I would then receive the pension from the covenant. Make sense? Okay. If we left the ECC, could we still go to Covenant Pines for Genesis vacation? Short answer is yes. If they would have us in terms of like, if we could schedule it. Covenant Pines rents churches from various denominations, non-denominational churches. Certainly they give some preference to covenant churches, but they would not say no to us just because we left the covenant church. Okay. So what happens next? In the next few weeks, we, Genesis, will announce the date for an upcoming congregational meeting, at which time the members will vote on the following matter. Should Genesis West voluntarily leave the Evangelical Covenant Church? And again, that vote to pass would need to carry by a 2/3 majority. Now, in our Constitution, it requires that we give a 90-day notice for a vote of that nature. So if we send out an email tomorrow, the earliest we could do that would be December, January, February 12th, I guess that would be. So that date will come in an email in the next couple of weeks. It would likely be late February, early March that we would have that vote. All right. Again, I hope you're writing down your questions. We'll do lots of questions, and I am moving a little faster than I even thought I would. So that is really good news, but I hope I'm covering what I need to cover. Let's talk for a little bit about some possible next steps for holistic embodiment of our LGBTQIA plus inclusion statement. One of the first things that this has been in the works for several months now. Deb Link's given some vision to this. Kara Verhages gives some vision to this, but there are a group of people. We're calling it the LGBTQIA plus follow-up team. But they're being assembled to facilitate next steps, to create resources and further opportunities to grow and learn together. Similar to the listening committee, though a little bit more geared toward definitely still listening to the congregation, to hearing what we need to hear in order to make the right next steps. But then folks from our community would then create avenues, scenarios, classes, online experiences based on what our church needs to more fully embody this stance. It's one thing to make the vote back in May, but it's another thing entirely to live that out well. And it's not an easy one, especially since we've explicitly stated that Genesis wants to be a church that, while is fully inclusive in terms of participation, certainly does not require every single person that's a part of Genesis to personally theologically agree. We want to create a space where we can faithfully dissent from one another in this matter and in almost every other matter, so that we're not going to be a one-issue church, but we're also not going to, and we're never going to mandate that you have one belief over another. And this is one in particular. So we're going to have to live into that well, right? I mean, that's a difficult journey. And then some of the examples that you've already told us that you would like us to explore together, further resources and growth opportunities. Sounds like we need to do some equipping of parents to talk to their children at different developmental stages about their own gender identity and sexuality, as well as the issue of gender identity and sexuality in general. We've heard that from lots of you. Like, how do I even start to talk to my kids about this in a way that is developmentally appropriate and that really helps, right? And I want to say this too. Like, I want to stop talking for a second. Like, breathe in, breathe out. I can't even really see your faces, but through the Zoom, I'm feeling like oh my gosh, I didn't even think about that. Oh my gosh, how am I going to, like, so if you're feeling some increasing anxiety about that, it's okay. That's totally normal to feel like, how do I lean into this kind of change when I'm maybe less than comfortable about it? We're going to do it at the pace of trust, and we're going to be very gentle with each other. So I just feel like that's super important to say. But we want to provide some resources and some supportive environments for those experiencing negative responses from family members. I don't know if I've talked to some of you. It's probably happening more than I think, but where all of a sudden now family members are finding out of the stance that Genesis now has, and now you find yourself in weird conversations. And what do you do? And what do you say? And how do you differentiate? But also, how do you explain and get into conversations without getting overly triggered? So we want to help you with that. And as I've already stated, we want to continue to foster an environment at Genesis that includes healthy disagreement on this matter and many matters. And so there are ways to do that well, listening and learning together. We want to provide further resources and conversations for those who would like to continue to study the Bible and other resources about inclusion. We know that some of you have said, listen, I voted yes, but I still really need to do some work around this. I don't really know where I'm at on this. And so if that's you, that's awesome. We want to provide some open-ended spaces for you to continue to study in a way that makes sense, in a way that's robust. And of course, we want to create opportunities for parents to support one another through uncertain situations related to this topic. Maybe it's kids, maybe it's family members, and you're just wondering what to do. So that is not exhaustive in any way, shape, or form, but those are some of the further resources and growth opportunities that we know we need to lean into if we're going to fully embody this space of being inclusive and healthy, and and knowing how to do that well, both in COVID and once we get beyond COVID. So that is that section. Okay, I'm gonna go back for that. I'm gonna stop the screen share for a second. And I want to take a pause, and we're going to go into a time for some questions. So, okay, people, go ahead and think about it, write your question down, and we will, by the way, this is recorded, this meeting, and we are taking minutes of the whole thing too, including the questions and responses. I don't promise to have a response for every single question, but I promise to do my very best. Okay. So use the chat and write your question. Or maybe it's a comment. A comment is totally fine. And again, I will do my best to respond. These questions could have to do with anything. I think maybe my preference would be some of the first ones. We would give space to for people to ask questions about the process of leaving the ECC, the possibility of staying in the ECC, and any of the details that have to do with that. Okay, will there be a discussion opportunity leading up to the vote on staying and leaving the ECC? Yes, and this is the first one. So this is it. I mean, this is not the only one, but this is what this is designed to do, to be a discussion. Dan, does that make sense? I mean, were you thinking about a different kind of environment, a smaller group environment, maybe? So yes, and please consider this as one of those. I mean, where people have the opportunity to share their thoughts with the rest of the congregation. Yes, this is that opportunity. I mean, I'm not trying to be weird. I'm just saying 100%, this is that time. So that's why we wanted to give plenty of time for your questions, for your thoughts. If you have a comment about that, now's the time to share it. This won't be the only time, but please consider this to be a discussion time. Okay, from Joan, if we're already out of compliance with the ECC, is staying even an option? What a great question. It is and it isn't, okay? Staying is an option if you feel like this is a justice issue. If they're going to kick us out, they have to kick us out. We're going to go ahead and be who we are, but out of a sense of calling or passion, or maybe call it even civil disobedience or something, we sense we need to stay and be ourselves, but go through the process. That would be a reason for staying. That doesn't mean that we would get to stay, but it's different than voluntarily leaving. Does that, I can see your face, Joan. Does that answer the question? Okay, cool. Okay, hold on. I'm just trying to do it in order here, folks. Bob Timberley, are there organizations similar to the Covenant Collective that serve to support non-denominational congregations? There are, especially as it relates to, there are organizations that aren't solely based on like, hey, if you are open and affirming, join us. But there's an organization called I think it's called the Blue Water Collective, that have similar sort of third way beliefs as Genesis does. It's not a denomination, but it's an affiliation. The Covenant Collective, for those of you that don't know, is an organization that's being formed as we speak, made up right now of covenant churches who find themselves in places like we are. And the Covenant Collective is maybe going to be a credentialing type of space, and maybe it won't be. It's sort of trying to figure out its identity of, is it a supportive place for covenant churches and ex-covenant churches who are trying to live out their calling in the world, and certainly that's an affiliation that we would want to pursue. Are there others? Yes. And that's part of what we would do research from. Okay. From Rajan, at this point, I feel strongly about staying, about being interrupters and making them kick us out. Thank you, Rajan. Thank you for that honest opinion. It's fantastic. And feel free, anyone, to share similar ones or completely opposite ones. That's what this discussion is about. Steve, would you be able to put those original 4 questions back up for a second? Absolutely. Let me try to do that. Okay, that's not what we want. How do I go back? Hold on. Just a second, people. 4 questions. Sorry, you guys. Hold on. Okay. All right. Shoot. Sorry, guys. All right. Are you seeing that? Those are the 4, right, Deb? Okay. We'll just keep that up for a bit. I have to pull up my chat again. All right. From Will Lee. If we choose to stay and fight, are there points in the process where we get to defend ourselves and share our perspective? Is it like a trial? What it is at first the executive conference of the Northwest Conference would meet with primarily me and the elders, and they would pull out our statement and they would say, do you intend to follow this, do same-sex weddings and such? And then they would say that automatically puts you out of harmony. There would be a vote on that, and we would certainly get to explain our reasonings for why we chose that path. We certainly would get to defend ourselves. At the annual meeting, oddly, it is kind of like a trial. And representatives from the church would get to talk at the annual meeting before the vote is made. And yeah, so is that, sorry, Will, I don't know what your face is, but it isn't just like getting kicked out without a process. There is a process. And it takes a while. Starts with the local level, then it moves to the annual meeting level. Okay. From Jane and Jason, just Googled the ECC. Covenant Church says there are 875 congregations. Any sense of how many have left or are struggling with this? I don't know how many have left. I know one church in Austin, Texas just left, Vox Venete, and I've met their 2 pastors. I know I just don't know what the number is, Jason and Jane, and all. I know there are, a couple dozen churches that are either on this journey or have already made inclusive statements like this to varying degrees. Some say we cannot do same-sex weddings, but we will connect you with a pastor that does a same-sex wedding. We cannot hire people on staff, but elders are fully, an LGBTQIA member can be an elder, can be a member. So there are varying degrees within covenant churches of inclusion. It's unclear. It should be more clear, honestly, but it's unclear what the main, thing that would get you kicked out. But hiring staff and doing same-sex weddings definitely would. That's a clear out of harmony thing. So that's less nuanced. I hope that makes sense. And then I'm looking at you, Kara. I can see your face. So Kara, just like tell me to keep going, or give me a sense of, because I know you're involved in that too, or if you even want to say something with that. Okay, Kara? Okay. Danny Cook, I think I'm with Rajan. As you said, there's so much good about the ECC, yet they seem to be going against their own ethos of allowing disagreement on non-central issues. I think there's value and trying to hold them to that and make the case for change on this policy. Thanks so much for that, Dan. That's good stuff. I have some comments on that too. I want to wait till the end to make those particular comments, because there is a broader context too that doesn't negate what we're saying, but there's a broader context too. Laura Maloney, well, I love the idea behind staying and fighting for our beliefs. As a reminder, we just saw our neighbor's First Covenant Church in Minneapolis go through that, and it was a long and painful process. And that's part of my comment. I think they did it in such a way that might be a little different than we do it, but we all know, well, some of us know in great detail how painful that was. I think if we stayed and fought, we could do that. We would need to choose how we will spend our energy and spend it at what we would need to spend it on that, but also keep being us. So I love it. This is great. Other comments or questions? I'm just scrolling through to look at some of your faces. Hi, everybody. There you are. Oh, I just saw Mary Nichols smile, I think. That was sweet. Hi, Mary. Okay. Bob, would there be any value for us to connect with other denominations, i.e. the United Church of Christ? Absolutely. Again, I think even in the months leading up to the vote, there's a guy that goes to Genesis, or at least went to Genesis before COVID. He works at United. It's a UCC seminary right here in St. Paul. And he's a great resource, great guy. Could talk to us a lot about, for example, the UCC is congregational in its polity, like we are. And what that means is that most of the power, decision-making power, is given to the local church, as opposed to like the Episcopal Church, which is much more bishop-led. That's one of the considerations that we'll need to make. But then it's a when you look at the theology of the UCC, is there enough coherence there? Certainly they're inclusive. They've been inclusive for 40 years or something like that, which is really incredible when you think about it. But there are really different, again, when you're talking about denominations, you have to look at theological coherence and then congregational polity, which is how a church is governed. And you have to really look at what's allowed, what's not allowed, how are decisions made, where's the role of the elders, the pastor, if there's a bishop, what's the role of the bishop? All those things are important. Bob, that clearly supports our vision. Yes, not an entry interview. Yeah, but as a helpful resource in our decision-making process, 100%. Yeah, I think we could do some exploratory conversations like that. And of course, the ELCA, for example, Elam is an ELCA church, and so we have lots of connections there. Okay, Deb Link. If one of the most important issues is what our own dear LGBTQIA members and attenders feel about this issue, how would someone share those thoughts with Genesis, especially if their identity is not public knowledge? 100%. So I think such a great question. So, firstly, I've reached out to some LGBTQIA folks in our church who are out, just to ask them what they think. And if you are out and you want to share, just send an email to me or one of the elders. That'd be great. elders@genesiscup.org. If you're not out and you would still like to share, I think I'm just trying to think what's the best way to do that. I'm open to lots of suggestions. I mean, in a way that's anonymous. You could write an anonymous letter and send it to Genesis. Our address is right on the website. It's 3978 West Broadway in Robbinsdale. That'd probably be the easiest way to do an anonymous how to share your opinion. Gosh, if anyone else can think of other options for anonymously sharing your thoughts, especially if you're in the queer community, you can put that on the chat. That'd be great. I mean, how amazing would that be to get a good old-fashioned letter in the good old-fashioned mail? Okay. Andrew, probably create a form submission on the website and not require contact info. 100%. That's a great idea. Thank you. Jane and Jason, I'm looking at the time. Okay, we're doing great. Another newbie question. What are practical pros and cons of being a part of a denomination versus non-denominational? What a great question. So one of the pros of being a part of a denomination, especially if you're congregational and polity, which we are, which means the elders and the members have a lot of say in terms of decision-making, is when something gets funky, when a pastor embezzles or gets involved in some shady behavioral issue, for example, the denomination, usually any denomination worth their salt, and the ECC is really good at this, has a process where they step right in and they help that church. They help that church work through that and walk through that, both in terms of figuring out what to do in the present and figuring out what to do in the long term. So, in the sense of protecting the church from an abusive pastor, a denomination is really important for that. Secondly, for pastors and really even community members to have other like-minded people that you rub shoulders with at church conferences. Like in the ECC, we have a couple of them, the annual meeting in June and then midwinter in January. It's a way for clergy to have some collegial relationships with each other and know that they're not alone. There's and even all the way down to many denominations, including the ECC, has money lending capabilities if you go into a capital campaign. So those are just a few. Benefits of being non-denominational, I think, are, assuming you have a healthy pastor, healthy elder, healthy membership team, you can chart your course without undue pressure from a group of people saying you can't, make a inclusion statement, for example. Now there's some dangers in being independent like that, but there's also some real freedoms as long as you exercise those freedoms with some maturity. So I will also say that for congregational churches like ours, many times they function a lot like a non-denominational church, whereas, the members have ultimate decision-making power in the annual meeting. They're governed by the elders in the meantime. And that's a lot of how a denominational church, a non-denominational church functions anyway. So, and yes, Dan, isn't there something to be said for being connected denominationally in terms of being meaningful, connected to the larger body of Christ? For sure there is. Yeah. I think that's a huge consideration. It's probably one of the big reasons why we started with the denomination. I will say too, just to play both sides, that's not the only way. There's meaningful connections to be had. Churches even like, for example, we could do a better job of it, but like we are experiencing some pretty sweet fellowship and connection with Elam without a denominational commonality. And we can probably expand that to different churches with some focus and emphasis. So I don't think that's the only way, but it sure is a good way, and can be a denomination can be a great way to stay connected to the larger body of Christ, for sure. Other questions or comments or
Did you see Michelle's?
oh no, I missed it. Okay.
Right above
Yeah.
the answer.
Sorry. Thank you. Michelle Kelly, could you elaborate a little more on the process that First Covenant experienced? Yeah. So First Covenant Church right there in downtown Minneapolis, number one, that church has some of the most history of maybe any other covenant church. It's the historical downtown church from which North Park, college and seminary eventually emerged from. They've had some of the most, again, historic covenant pastors come out of that. It is one of the oldest covenant churches. And so it's very, very storied, number one. Number two, their current pastor, Dan, has been on staff there for about 10 years. And he went through a process with the church where the church, much like we did, came to conclude that they believed in being fully inclusive. Now, they had never done a same-sex wedding at their church. There was a same-sex wedding done, but not by the pastor, Dan. But Pastor Dan was suspended for essentially leading them through that process and some other matters, though not suspended for doing a same-sex wedding. And First Covenant Church did not recognize that suspension. Instead, and because when a pastor is suspended in the Covenant Church, they are not allowed to enter the building, not allowed to work a day, not allowed to have any communication with staff or congregation. They're just out for a period of 6 weeks, maybe, or 8 weeks. First Covenant Church chose to not recognize that suspension, and Dan kept on working. And so they went back and forth between their board and between the executive conference of the Northwest Conference, which is our local conference. Many, many conversations, many emails back and forth. Eventually, the Northwest Conference executive board deemed them to be out of harmony, which sent the process to the evangelical church, to the national covenant. And then it came up for a vote in the annual meeting. And again, the annual meeting is a collection of delegates. So Genesis had 2 delegates, and I think there was about 1,000 delegates present. So the bigger the church, the more the delegates. And after significant conversation back and forth, and people talking in favor of them being dismissed, people talking in favor of them not being dismissed, they were eventually voted out by the delegates at the annual meeting. Kara, remind me, I think it was, around 75% affirmative. Deb, you were there. Linda, you were there too. Am I saying that right? That was about 75%. There's more to say, and I think anyone could say, oh yeah, well, this side was really, really rude, or that side was really, really didn't engage. At the end of the day, I think the process, I think it took about 3 years. Am I right in that, Kara? Probably about 3 years. Yeah. Thanks for asking the question. Just to underscore, for First Covenant, there was just lots of feelings. Like, I'm trying to come up with a corollary. Like, it'd be if because it's just such a historic church. I mean, like 50 years ago, if someone would have said First Covenant would get kicked out, it would be like no one would even believe it. And by the way, that's the first church to ever get kicked out of the covenant in 134 years of history. Okay, Michelle. So would you say that spurred other churches to feel free to engage in the same conversations around the inclusion statement? I think that's a great question. I think it was happening already among some churches. Other churches, it felt like it emboldened them perhaps to say, we need to be out loud about this conversation that we're already having. I don't know really to this day how many churches. I mean, there's not like there's not a club or a website that, like click here if you're currently going through an inclusion statement, or if you already have one, believe it or not. So I don't know how many are. It certainly seems like when it became legal in the US to be married to someone of your same gender, that spurred on the conversation. When voices like, David Gushee and others began to change their mind on the issue, that I think was a factor in churches in the covenant and elsewhere starting to have this conversation. And as more and more people in the covenant started having it, more and more people, would begin to talk about it. I think it's been a big issue in the covenant, I would say, for at least 7 years now, since about 2013 or maybe 14, and earlier than that, really. But I think it's been a widespread issue since about 2013. Okay. So I hope that answers your question, Michelle. Bob, so they were dismissed. Yeah, but they remain on the journey. Yes, absolutely. From Will Lee, my understanding was that at the annual meeting, the issue of inclusion kept getting framed as an issue of biblical authority instead of how we have framed it as a non-central issue that believers of goodwill can disagree. Am I understanding that right? That's probably going to be an opinion call. I think it is true that much of the conversation, and I want to be careful too, because some of that conversation that I'm now going to be referring to is in executive committees. That means I can't talk about it. So I think it's fair to say, though, Will, that for many in the covenant, this does seem like an issue of biblical authority and not an issue that we can agree to disagree on. I think that's probably fair. Not for all, and not even for all that might land on the traditional side. But I think for many, that is true. And no judgment on that, but I think that's probably true. Kara, thank you. I think, so this is from Kara Verhage, who's been in the covenant her whole life, by the way. I think it also created a hard stop on the conversation as it was creeping up in congregations. I know of several congregations whose leadership said the conversation is a no-go. So meaning that, Kara, are you saying like that vote in 2019 was a hard stop because it was like, the covenant has spoken?
Yeah, they really, I get the sense, certainly in some congregations that I'm connected with here in the cities, that suddenly it became a worrisome thing. So when it was coming up from more of the congregational, that grassroots, like, let's talk about this, leadership in some of these churches tended to say, that's a non-starter. Like, we're not gonna discuss it. So I don't know, hopefully that will change, but it both spurred those congregations that were open and willing, and then I think created a level of potential like silence in other churches.
Okay. Thank you, Kara. Anything else to say about that? I wonder, I'm seeing Deb chiming in. Can we unmute Deb? Deb, would you mind if we unmute you for a second and you can chime in on what you saw and heard at the annual meeting as it relates to biblical authority versus non-central?
Well, I think your point is well taken about the executive committee and the parts that aren't supposed to be discussed, or the confidentiality. If I'm remembering correctly, even the parts that were not in executive committee, I think that you're right. There were some people talking about biblical authority. I just heard a lot of people talking about the history of the covenant in, like you said, like majoring on the majors, and people talking about like their parents having been pastors in the covenant church and them having been pastors in the covenant church, and how this vote felt like kind of a step away from the entire history of how the covenant had always thought about things. And in fact, that I've never been a part of a covenant church, and so that whole issue of the covenant always having been a place of flexibility around these issues wasn't something I was familiar with. Like, I learned about it through hearing the discussion at the annual meeting. And so I do think it came through because it came through very loud and clear to me, at least. So I think that view was represented. I don't think if we tried to represent it, it would be anything new, is what I'm saying.
Okay, thank you, Deb. And I want to agree with that. Like, there's a big swath of people that would say just what Deb said in the covenant, that in the covenant it's always majored on that, centered on Christ and not on controversial issues that we can disagree on. And what you just said, Deb, is fascinating, that it's not like, so like if we said, hey, what about our view? It's not like that's a novel view. That's more of the historic covenant view that most people, well, many believe is the historic covenant view. Thank you for that clarification. Okay, looking for other questions, concerns, comments, thoughts. This is really a good. This is just what I was hoping for.
Steve, can I just add? I'll put that a different way.
Mm-hmm.
My sense at the annual meeting is that there was a whole crew of people who were grieving the fact that it felt like the covenant had lost their DNA.
Yes.
That's what I felt, right? Like, so that's not like executive committee or not. I just felt like there was a group of people who were there to really double down on the vote. And then there was a group of people there that were like grieving, and you could tell who was who. And I think both of them spoke their piece.
That is very well said. Thank you for that, Deb. And I would, again, I don't need to echo you, but I will say there is a large swath of covenanters, again, even some of whom are traditional on the matter, that, like, as it relates to that annual meeting in 2019, that just feels like that was our darkest day. Even those who maybe voted yes, that was a really, really dark moment for a lot of reasons, that they can't quite get their hands on or, fingers on. So thank you, Deb. Please keep chiming in. Deb was there. Linda Amos was there. They were our two delegates that went to Omaha in 2019. I was there. Kara was there. I think that's all the Genesis folks that were there, but other questions, comments? Things that you were hoping I would cover that I didn't. Elizabeth, your cat is right behind you. It's so cute. I love it. Okay. From Jenny Gullickson. As a previous covenant pastor, I am in that grieving camp. When I consider, do we stay and fight or leave, I hear and honor those that feel the need to fight the injustice. And so much of me feels that the door has been so clearly closed that I don't want to be a part of a group that has closed the door so solidly. Thanks, Jenny. And, it's different. Thanks for conveying that so clearly. I mean, I guess that I would agree. And again, Jenny, you are one of the most gracious and fair people I've ever known. So for you to say that, but I would tend to agree. It's like if we would consider staying and fighting, I just would want everyone to know as clearly as possible that, like, it is not an open issue in the covenant right now, meaning, hey, let's continue to really process this, talk about this. It really is a closed, with a decisive vote, 75%, leadership that is saying we have to move beyond this. We have spent 10 years talking about this, and it's time to move on to other more important things. It's not that we couldn't be a voice or have a voice, but I'm going to Michelle Kelly. So what do we anticipate a fight looking like? It would at times be just simply being ignored. It would be my covenant colleagues who I'm friends with, who happen to be traditional, encouraging me, begging me to do the Christ-like thing and leave, for the sake of unity, for the sake of peace. And I'm being a little facetious right there when I said the Christ-like thing. I shouldn't have said that probably, but that would be comments that I would get, people saying, how is this helping? How is this helping the body of Christ? How is this moving it forward? It would also be pressure from denominational leadership, both from our conference and nationally. So that's what the fight would look like. I'm going to go back up. And again, I want to thank you, Jenny. Again, just want to point out previous covenant pastor. And then Will, help me understand. I'm genuinely curious. Why would a delegate who's grieved by the falling away from the covenant church ethos DNA feel bad about it, vote to dismiss the church? I don't know. And I'm not saying that they did. It could have been 100% of the churches that were, grieved, that voted. They were part of the 25%, so please, if I somehow insinuated, or one of us insinuated, that we know that there's a church who was grieved but also voted yes, we don't know that there is, or that they did that. And I think that's just a sense of, sometimes you see 75% and we think, oh, that's so much, but boy, the 25% is a pretty big number too. That's 250 or so delegates. And I was in the pastor's meeting, which is different from the delegate meeting too. And so, I got to hear a lot of passionate voices on both sides, on the ministerium side as well. So, and I would say about, that percentage as well. So, Michelle, okay, I already answered that question. Rajan, thank you, Jenny. I hear what you're saying. I believe we can make leaving also an act of interruption. Yeah, I think so too. And sorry, I kind of read that too fast. Rajan said, thank you, Jenny. Rajan previously said, I think we should stay. And so she's just saying, yeah, I hear what you're saying. I believe we can make leaving also an act of interruption. I think we need to look at it like that. It's not, leaving or staying, making a statement, not making a statement. It's easy to fall into the sort of binary categories of one way is the sort of easy way and the other way is the hard way. I think there's going to be easy and hard things to both decisions. Any decision we would make here has easy sides and hard sides. And, yeah. Anyway, it's good.
Okay. Speaking of interrupting, I'm so sorry. I don't know how to make my chat appear.
Oh, is that Mary?
I don't know how to make my chat appear. Can I just say it?
Yeah, honey. On the bottom, is there a thing that says more?
No.
With 3 dots?
3 dots. Save chat. Is that it?
Well, can you see the chat?
You know what? Can I, instead of
Can you just talk
further, can I just say my thoughts?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Sorry, you can teach me later.
Okay, cool.
So just sort of to continue on what you were saying, I feel torn, I think, between competing values. One being using our voice to stand up for what we believe and for people who have been disenfranchised. On the other hand, I have a value of protecting the time and energy of our elder team and you and our congregation. And it would be costly to do a fight like this. And so I would hope that we would weigh both of those in the balance as we decide, which is the focus that we need to do as a community so that we know what we're choosing if we were to choose to fight. Does that make sense?
Yes, I love that so much. Can you just, do you mind repeating the piece about the competing values? Because I think that's worthy of, for
Okay.
anyone who is like maybe like checked out, check us back in, because I think that's so important. It brings us into beyond an either or and into like, oh, we have to choose because we have limited energy. So could you just
Right.
repeat that again?
Yeah, I feel conflicting values within myself. On the one hand is the value of standing up for what we believe and using our voice to stand up for people who have been disenfranchised. And that's really important. But on the other hand is that it would take time and energy from you, from the elder team, from our congregation, and focus. And I think it's a matter of weighing where our focus needs to be so we can do the greatest amount of ministry.
Yeah. Thanks. Thanks, babe. Um, yeah, that's really good. Okay, Becky Patton. Having been through the listening process, I realized that the energy it takes to make space and be with one another in the transition is taxing. Thus, where do we want to spend the energy at a corporate level or a personal level of building relationships together in and with LGBTQIA plus? And so that's another way of saying competing values. It's like, if being in relational transition is taxing and takes energy, where do we want to spend the energy? And I think that's the question, gang. I really think that's the question. And should I stay, or should we stay, or should we go? Given that we have limited energy, and maybe given that we have, and again, I want to point out, like, what are the voices of the queer folks in our community saying? What are they saying? Do they want this to be a fight with the denomination, or do they want, and they don't get to have the only say, but we certainly need to hear from their voices as well. So from Bob Timperley, we can still stand up for the disenfranchised among us outside of the covenant. 100%. Absolutely. Yep. Okay. Deb Link. Steve, if we decided not to fight, how could that energy be repurposed? And I think it would be, it would be very hard to even keep pressing into the part 3 of this agenda of further resources, further living into embodying our identity as an inclusive church, if we're sort of like, again, with limited energy, if we were free to not fight our denomination, we could create newer spaces, especially as we think about a post-COVID world. It will happen, but a post-COVID world, we're gathering together and being a little more public in worship, of really finding ways to create spaces to be beautifully and wonderfully affirming and inclusive to new people in our church who are queer. I think that becomes really hard when, and all of a sudden they find out, oh my gosh, this church is embroiled in a denominational battle. I thought that we were over this. And I'm going to tell you, like, the experiences I've had with folks who are LGBTQ, it's like, oh, I'm not getting a part. I'm not going to be a part of a church who's in the middle of a denominational battle. Anyway, it's very difficult. Maybe some, but others would just say that it just doesn't feel safe. So, gosh, there's probably many more ways I could answer that, but it's just energy to be for something rather than against something. And then Jenny said, thank you, Mary. Well said. I agree. From the Chamberlains, I feel it's important to recognize that we are still fresh off of and still within a healing process of our church. True. I think you're referencing 2 years ago, laying Steve Haynes off and going through the pain of that, and even some of the pain of this decision that meant that some people left our church because of it. And that was painful as well. So thank you for that reminder. It's not like this vote was just balloons and, champagne. It was hard. And so that speaks to what kind of energy do we have. And I think we have a lot of good energy to spend. I hope we spend it in the most productive way possible is my hope. So thanks for that, Chamberlains. That's so good. Jane and Jason, I want my kids feeling like I'm fighting for them, but I don't want them to feel like their identities are constantly at the top of the conversation. Exactly, Jane and Jason. I mean, that's what I'm feeling like for anyone who's queer in our community, to be like, thank you for fighting for it, but I don't want to be the center of the conversation, at all times. I think that's a really important distinction. Thank you for that. Checking the time. 8:17. So we're going to end in about 10 minutes here. So this would be the time. You guys, this has been so good, so robust. Won't be the last one, but conversation, discussion. And again, from Bob, thank you, Mike or Aaron or both. Thank you, Bob, for thanking the Chambies. The Chambies? Wow, that's new. Anyone who kind of, and I want to say this too, we're going to send out a survey tomorrow that includes some questions that we would love you to chime in on. But one of the questions is going to be, would you like to share something? And this is going to be anonymous. Would you like to share something that you didn't feel comfortable sharing in the chat yesterday, but that you want us to know? So if you don't feel comfortable sharing what you want to share now, there's going to be an opportunity to share it anonymously in the survey tomorrow. Okay. Or if you get your comment that you wanted to have at midnight tonight, as happens for some of us, or your question, and you're going to have more questions. And so feel free to shoot them off to me, and I'll get that, I'll talk to the right people and get back to you. But maybe some final thoughts, comments, questions. Katie Troughton, I think I've heard tonight an expansion of the thinking of what it means to stay or go. Fighting doesn't have to only be associated with one or the other. Thank you, Katie. Thank you, Katie. Thank you, Katie. So important in so many of these things. It's so easy to think one thing, staying means this, leaving means that. Maybe we need to expand our way of thinking. Thank you for that. That's so good. Becky Patton, Genesis is about new beginnings, and this is one that we're all entering together. Yes, yes, yes. I agree. Elizabeth, similarly, a redefinition of what it means to harness our energy. Yes, yes, yes. Part of our value is simplicity, right? Part of that means knowing our limits, knowing our yeses, knowing our nos. This is part of this conversation. And I don't know what the answer is, but part of simplicity means we don't have endless energy and we don't have endless yeses. We have some yeses we have to give, and that means we have some no's we have to give. And that's just being real about our limits as people and as a church. It's good. I like this, like people are starting to chime in, like synthesis of the night. That's so helpful. Any other synthesis comments would be helpful. Or any other comments as well. And did I miss any? I don't think I did. You guys, I painted my office. I don't know if you can tell. This is the office I normally. It used to be tan. Now it's kind of like a lilac. Oh my gosh, it's so good. I'm obsessed with it now. It's just I love it. I needed a change, Jeez. Okay, Chamberlains. So this is Mike. As an elder, and imagining how this conversation was going to go, I'm impressed and thankful for our community and how interactive we are and have been. I agree 100%. Conversation and participation is so helpful. Yes, yes, yes. I agree totally. I'm so proud of you guys. Jenny Gullickson, I'm just noticing that we are doing such a great job of listening and hearing and making room for each other. So thankful for this. Yes, yes. our value of conversation, right? Hopefully it's real, not just aspirational. We're going to talk, we're going to listen, we're going to change our mind. Nothing's off limits. It's really, really good. And this won't be the last conversation. Obviously, it's a robust conversation. Nate DeBoer, at the end of the day, we are a community, and by working together, we'll embody the Spirit. Yes, yes, yes. Not one of us alone, but all of us together. So good. Okay, from Hannah. Yes, Jason and Jane and Deb. Some LGBT persons just want to be in a place that they can grow and be them without fighting or hearing the negative. Some advocates and activists in the LGBTQ community, but some want to find a place to grow and enjoy the community. Maybe we spend our energy instead to the community experiencing the LGBT stories and experiences and learn and grow together, find ways to learn together. Well said, Hannah. Thank you. I love that so much. And that's like, maybe Deb, that's the answer to the question you were asking me. That's how we could spend energy, listening to stories, having it be a safe place. So thank you, Hannah. So good. I mean, for a Zoom call, this wasn't all that bad, people. You guys are amazing. Amazing. Any last comments or questions? Okay, again, please reach out via the survey tomorrow, or just send an email to me or elders at genesiscov.org. If there was something you wanted to say, but like, I don't want to say that with my name associated with it on the chat, I don't want to do that. That's totally fine. Please reach out. We want to hear your voices, especially those that didn't feel comfortable putting it out loud there in the chat. All right, I want to go to the last slide. Can everybody see that? Advent at Genesis. The staff is so excited, and here are some things that are happening for Advent. There's going to be family Advent at home kits. Yes. Allie's putting those together. You can pick them up on November 21st. That's coming up. There's going to be a practicing Advent kit for adults. Yes. Pick up on the 21st. We'll have details about where to pick up. I assume that's going to be at Elam. We're going to do Secret Santas. Oh my gosh. Not for everyone. If you want to do Secret Santa, you can. Sign up by November 23rd. We'll send out a link for how to sign up. That's going to be super fun. Obviously, we're going to be worshiping at 10 a.m. on Zoom on Sundays. First Sunday of Advent is the 29th of November. And then you guys, we are going to be doing these conversations on the Mondays of Advent. So starting on November 30th, 7:30, brief conversations centering on this book called Honest Advent by Scott Erickson. I'll be leading those, and I want that to be it's a really gorgeous, expansive book on what Advent means, asking all kinds of questions. And we're going to do some just reflecting together on that. So that can be a practice that you can choose. You can come to one of them or two of them or all four of them or none of them. So it's not like you have to, if you miss the first one, you can't go to the second one. They'll be self-contained. So that's Mondays, 7:30. And then we will explain what this means in the email tomorrow, but we're going to be doing a really cool partnership with Ace in the City, where you as a person or you as a family can provide some gifts for people that need some gifts, and it's going to be super cool. Kara's, again, we're going to explain that in the email tomorrow. Hopefully you've gotten the word, but we are still looking for people to take on some roles in the Genesis virtual Christmas pageant. What this is you'll get your role, you'll get your script, and you'll just record your part, okay? And then you'll send in the video, and then we'll put the video all together. And then you guys, it's going to be so great. We're going to watch it somehow together on the 23rd at 6:30. And then on December 24th, as Advent comes to a close, there's going to be a 6:30 candlelight worship at Elam in the parking lot. We're going to have some fires going to keep as warm as possible. It's going to look gorgeous, sound gorgeous. We'll sing together. We'll be together outside. I'm going to order up some snow to fall, so hopefully that'll come. Oh, you guys, it's going to be great. So Advent's going to be just so sweet. Okay. Oh, yes. Also, Will Lee is doing morning prayer at 7:30 a.m. every Thursday on Zoom, including tomorrow morning. Okay. Is the link, Will, can that be on the Genesis Facebook community page? Yeah, I hope so. Yeah.
It will be tonight. Yeah.
Will be tonight. So join Will for some prayers Thursday mornings, 7:30. It's going to be great. Hannah, I don't know what you're asking. Are customs necessary? Is that a joke? Is that a real question? I don't understand the question.
Costumes.
Oh, costumes. I think so. Probably. I don't know. That's up to Allie. But I mean, at least a towel wrapped around your head, probably, you know, I mean, put some, sandals on or something. Okay, Rajan, how can we get the Honest Advent book? Oh my gosh, Amazon's a 1 and 2 month wait. I'm sorry, that book, I mean, it's like number 1 on Amazon. Not quite, but almost. We'll do some research and we'll see if we can pull some strings. I think it's Zondervan. But if there are strings to be pulled, we'll pull them and we'll get you some copies. If worse comes to worse, you can get it on Kindle, which is not the best, but you could at least, there's some art in there that does come through, I think, in Kindle, but Kindle would be a way to do it if you can't get the actual book. Sorry. Okay, Allie is saying costumes are optional, but strongly encouraged. The Queen has spoken. Rajan, Kindle works. Okay. I want to be faithful to our time, 8:28. You guys are the best. Thank you so much for engaging with such robust and good and healthy and awesome conversation. This is being recorded, so if you, for whatever reason, want to hit it again, or if your roommate or spouse or partner or someone, you missed it and they want it, we're going to send out an email tomorrow with a link to the video. We'll also share the PowerPoint deck that I went through. That'll be available via the email. And we have some minutes of this conversation we just had. Oh, Mike, I mean, your fingers must be exhausted trying to capture all this stuff, but we'll have all that for you as soon as possible, hopefully tomorrow. Okay, everybody, have a great rest of your night. And let me stop sharing here. Have a great rest of your night. And thank you so much for showing up. This was great. Peace.